Welcome to a place where silence breaks, hearts awaken, and real love rises from the ashes of neglect. Here, we tell stories not just of romance, but of rediscovery, of what happens when a woman who's been invisible for years is finally seen. When a casual glance from someone unexpected turns into a fire that can't be ignored, when tension simmers into touch and forbidden becomes unforgettable, these stories aren't fantasy. They're raw, intimate, and deeply human. It's not just about passion, it's about healing, about remembering what it feels like to laugh again, to be desired again, to matter again. If you've ever loved in silence, longed for connection, or needed someone to remind you who you are, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into true love stories that are messy, magnetic, and real. It wasn't one moment that broke everything. That's the cruel thing about silence. It doesn't crash like thunder. It drips quietly until the flood has already filled the room and no one noticed. That's how it happened, slowly, softly, without warning. In the beginning, there were smiles, not many, but enough to feel real. There were dinners together, conversations in bed, kisses that lingered just a moment longer than needed. There was hope, that fragile, dangerous hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And when you're young and married, something feels like enough. But over time, something turned into nothing. There were mornings when breakfast was made but eaten apart, days passed with no questions asked, nights spent lying inches apart, but worlds away. His back became the most familiar part of him. The curve of his shoulder, the way his breathing steadied as he fell asleep. Those were the only things left that could still be memorized. Not his voice, not his eyes, just silence, breathing, distance. There was no screaming, no shattering, just a quiet forgetting, a slow fade. Love didn't leave with rage. It packed its bags in silence and slipped out one night while the television played and nobody noticed. At first it was confusing, then painful, then normal. It's strange how people get used to being invisible, how easy it is to stop speaking when you already know you won't be heard. There were moments of reaching, soft touches, attempts to start conversations. Hands brushed across his chest at night, hoping for a hand in return, but they always ended the same, eyes that looked past. Words that ended in half nods, a body that shifted just slightly out of reach. The worst part wasn't the absence of sex. It was the absence of being wanted. Desire had once lived there. It had danced in candlelight, whispered under sheets, wrapped itself around bodies in stolen afternoons. Now it was gone, not dead, just exiled, banished to some distant memory that wasn't allowed to be spoken of. And yet life continued. Dinner was made, bills were paid, holidays were spent in carefully orchestrated smiles. To anyone looking in, it looked fine. Two people, married, still here, still functioning, but inside there was nothing. No spark, no ache, not even anger, just routine, just numbness. What made it worse was knowing he didn't see it. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Maybe he was tired too. Maybe life had drained him in a way I couldn't reach anymore. Or maybe he never truly saw me in the first place, not like I needed, not like I had begged for in the quiet of my own heart. It's a particular kind of heartbreak to sit beside someone for 10 years and feel more alone than if you were by yourself. There were nights I would lie awake and imagine someone else, not a specific person, just someone who looked at me like I was still a woman. Someone who wanted to hear how my day went, who noticed when I changed my hair, who laughed at my terrible jokes, who touched me like I was soft and worth holding, not out of duty, not out of rhythm, but out of pure, unfiltered want. Sometimes I felt guilty for imagining it, but guilt is softer than starvation, and that's what it had become, emotional starvation. Years passed, and I stopped reaching. That's the part people never talk about, how eventually the heart learns to protect itself. It stops knocking, it stops hoping, it just sits there, quiet, waiting for something it doesn't believe in anymore. Even the mirror felt cold, Every reflection was a reminder of what had faded, not just beauty, but light. Life, laughter, everything dulled, and then came the whispers from inside. That old ache that hadn't died, just gone quiet. The whisper that said, "You're still here. You still feel. You still want to be touched. You still deserve to be loved." That whisper was dangerous. But it was also honest. What people don't understand is that love doesn't disappear in silence. It hides. It gets buried under disappointment, under unspoken words, under nights of cold sheets and cold stares. But it's still there, waiting, and when someone finally looks at you, really looks at you, something awakens, not lust, not escape, just that primal ache to be seen, to be chosen, to matter. 10 years of being unseen leaves marks deeper than bruises. It steals pieces. It makes a woman doubt her worth, question her body, fear her own voice. And when all of that is met with more silence, she begins to disappear, not to others, but to herself. And once a woman disappears from herself, the hunger that follows is unlike any other. That's the part no one tells you, that even in silence, love remembers. It just waits for someone to see. It was the kind of moment that shouldn't have meant anything. Just a boy walking through the door, laughing about something with a voice still wrapped in youth. Another one of those afternoons where the house was louder than usual, filled with energy that no longer belonged to me, but he walked in differently, like he belonged in his skin, like the world hadn't worn him down yet. There was something about the way he carried himself, not in a showy, arrogant way, just present, alive. He moved like he noticed things, like he paid attention, and that felt foreign. No one had paid attention in so long. It was just a glance at first, barely a second, but it landed. His eyes met mine, not out of politeness or habit, but fully, like he saw something, not just a figure in the kitchen, not a background presence keeping the house in order. He looked like he saw a person, a woman, and that alone made the air feel different. I looked away too quickly, embarrassed by how shaken I felt, but it stayed with me, that look, that brief, almost innocent moment that pressed somewhere deep, where things had been quiet for years. I told myself not to think about it, that it was nothing, but when someone truly sees you after so many years of being invisible, your mind holds on, whether you want it to or not. He came by more often after that. Not just for my son. Sometimes he'd stop in even when he knew no one else was home yet, just to ask if I needed anything. Sometimes he lingered too long in doorways, hands shoved in his pockets, saying things with his eyes he couldn't yet say aloud. I noticed the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, the way his eyes traced without rushing, without shame, like he was trying to memorize something, not out of lust, but awe. I began to feel it in the smallest things. How I started brushing my hair differently, how I chose earrings again, how my hands shook a little when pouring coffee, suddenly aware of how close he was. How my breath caught when he asked questions no one else had asked in years, about what I liked, what I used to do before all of this, what made me smile. He asked like he genuinely wanted to know, and I answered. Like I remembered I used to matter. There were moments when I caught myself laughing and didn't recognize the sound. It had been that long. He made me laugh without trying, and more than that, he made me feel something that had felt dangerous for so long. I wasn't supposed to feel anything outside of duty, but he made me remember the days when I was more than someone's placeholder, more than someone's responsibility. He made me remember I had a heart. A body, a soul. The lines blurred slowly. He never crossed them. Not at first, but the space between us got tighter with every visit. I could feel it in the way he stood just close enough for his presence to touch me without a word. In the way his voice softened when we were alone. In the way his hands sometimes lingered a second longer than necessary when he handed me something. Gentle, respectful, but charged, not with hunger, but with reverence. There was a day the light caught his face just right, and I saw it written across him. Want, not just for what I looked like, but for what I carried. He wanted to know what it felt like to hold someone who had loved and lost, who had broken quietly but still stood. He didn't flinch at my years. He didn't shrink from the weight of what I carried. If anything, he leaned into it, wanted it. He saw something beautiful in the pieces I thought no one would ever love again. And when our eyes met one afternoon, and neither of us looked away, I felt something break open inside me. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't shameful. It was raw, soft, overwhelming. He didn't touch me. Not yet, but everything in his gaze said he would. Only if I wanted him to. Only if I asked. That night I cried, not from guilt, but from the ache of being seen, the ache of being reminded that I was still here. That under the layers of silence and years of being overlooked, there was still a woman who could be wanted, who could be cherished. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't need to. Love was already there. In the way he looked at me like I was made of something rare. In the way he made space for my laughter, for my silence, for my story. In the way he never rushed me, never demanded, only offered himself fully, without fear, without agenda, just presence, just warmth, just truth. It wasn't about being touched. It was about being known, fully, quietly, deeply, and in his eyes, for the first time in years, I finally remembered what it felt like to be a woman again, not invisible, not forgotten, not functional, a woman, seen. It never started with a plan, no secret intentions, no lines crossed, just the smallest moments strung together like threads, quiet and innocent until they weren't anymore, until they held weight, until they pulsed with something unspoken. The glances came first. They were soft, like whispers. He would look over his shoulder while pouring a glass of water, and I'd catch him watching. Not staring, just observing, like he was trying to figure something out, like he saw something worth studying. I looked away the first few times, unsure if I imagined it, but the heat that lingered in my chest said otherwise. Then came the conversations, easy at first, lighthearted, jokes that made me laugh without effort, thoughts I hadn't shared with anyone in years slipping out before I could stop them. He listened differently. He didn't just nod, he absorbed. He asked follow-ups. He remembered. When he looked at me, it wasn't out of politeness. It was with intent, as though every word mattered. And in between those conversations were silences, strange, comfortable ones. He would sit close enough to feel but not touch. And in that space, something stirred, something that didn't have a name yet, something that hummed under my skin. The first touch wasn't planned, just a brush of his fingers against mine when we both reached for the same dish. But it lingered. Neither of us moved away. The contact was so light, so quick, and yet it sent something sharp and alive through my chest. I pulled back, and he didn't chase, but his eyes told me he felt it too. After that, it was harder to pretend. He came around more often, always with a reason, never out of place. But I began to notice how the air shifted when he entered the room, how my body softened in his presence, how I'd find myself standing a little taller, dressing with a little more care, hoping, not expecting, but hoping he would notice, and he always did. Not with compliments, but with the kind of gaze that doesn't move too quickly. The kind that sees without needing to say a word. Tension became the third presence in the room. It wasn't heavy or frantic. It was patient, respectful even, but alive. Every time he stood too close, every time his hand brushed the small of my back, every time he leaned in during a shared laugh, and I could feel the heat of his breath, it grew. One evening, it cracked. He had stayed late, helping with something small. I don't even remember what. What I remember is how quiet the house was once everyone else had gone to bed. Just the two of us in the soft glow of the kitchen, standing too close for too long. I turned to say something. I don't even remember what, but he was already looking at me, and in that look was everything. There was no decision, no conscious move, just breathe, just stillness. and then his hand touched my face. Gently, like he was waiting for me to flinch, but I didn't. I leaned in just slightly, just enough. Our lips didn't crash, they met slowly, carefully, like we were afraid to wake something sacred. There was no rush, no urgency, only that deep, aching relief of finally arriving where you didn't know you were meant to be. When he kissed me, it didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like a return. His hands didn't grab. They held. They moved over my skin with reverence, not hunger, and mine did the same. The years of being untouched, unnoticed, unloved, they poured out of me, not in tears, but in surrender, in the way I let myself be seen, be felt, be opened again. He didn't speak, not with words, but every movement said what language couldn't. I see you, I want you, I choose you. Clothes fell away like memories, not discarded in haste, but removed with care. And when his body met mine, it wasn't about fire. It was about warmth, about a hunger that didn't devour, it healed. He moved slowly, as if time had stopped just for us, and maybe it had. In that moment, there was no past, no guilt, no future to worry about. Just breathe, just skin, just the quiet sound of two people finding something they thought was lost forever. I remember his hand in mine, fingers interlocked. I remember the way he held my gaze, not breaking it even as the world narrowed to only sensation. I remember the trembling in his touch, the way his chest rose and fell in sync with mine, the way his body fit against me like it had always been meant to. It wasn't wild, it wasn't rushed, it was deep, present. It was the kind of intimacy that strips away every layer you didn't know you were hiding behind. And when it was over, he didn't pull away. He stayed. He pressed his forehead to mine, fingers still tracing circles against my skin, eyes still watching me like I was something sacred. No one had ever looked at me like that before, not even in the beginning, not like I was enough simply as I was. That night didn't erase the past, it didn't fix everything, but it awakened something that had been dying for years. Not just desire, but truth, the truth that being touched with love can bring a woman back to life. There was no plan for what came after. After the first time, his hands touched mine with intention. After the first night, our bodies met in silence, in heat, in something that wasn't meant to happen, but did. What came after wasn't fireworks or fantasy. It was quiet, still, but more powerful than anything I'd felt in years. He didn't ask for anything more. He didn't press. He didn't assume. He just kept showing up, not always in person, but in the way I smiled in the mirror again, in the way I stood a little taller when I walked, in the way my skin felt warmer, like it remembered it had a pulse. There was something about him, about the way he listened when I spoke, the way he reached for my hand like it was natural, like it belonged in his. The way he never made me feel like I was a mistake, but rather a secret he cherished. I had been someone's obligation for so long, that being someone's choice again felt foreign, scary, beautiful. He never treated me like I was broken. He never said I needed saving. He just let me be, and through him, I found the pieces of myself I hadn't seen in years. It started small, moments where I remembered my own laughter, not the polite kind, the deep belly kind, moments when I looked at the sky and felt the wind and didn't just exist through another day, but felt it, lived it. I started listening to old music again, songs I'd forgotten I loved. Started reading books I once adored. I even started humming in the kitchen without realizing it. It's not that he did anything grand. He didn't arrive with declarations or demands, but he looked at me like I was art, like every line, every scar, every age-worn crease had meaning. His voice softened when he said my name. His fingers traced my skin like it was familiar and new all at once. And when he held me, it wasn't just physical. It was like he was protecting something fragile, something sacred. There were moments when I'd watch him sleep, the way his chest rose and fell so calmly, and I'd wonder how someone so young could carry so much tenderness. I'd lay there, my head against his shoulder, and feel safe. Not hidden, not escaping, just safe. He never spoke of the future, neither did I. There were too many lines, too many risks, too many things that didn't belong in the light. But even in the quiet, we built something real. Something unspoken but true, and the longer it went on, the more I felt it. Not just love for him, but something deeper, something for myself. I stopped apologizing for wanting to be touched, for needing to be seen, for longing to be kissed slowly, held tightly, made to feel like I mattered. I stopped shrinking. I stopped second, guessing every smile, every shiver, every time I reached for him just because I wanted to. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about filling a gap left by someone who no longer cared. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine, my body, my joy, my worth. He reminded me how good it felt to be known. Really known, not for what I could give or keep together or fix, but for who I was, stripped of all the roles. Wife, mother, caretaker. He saw past all that. He saw the woman beneath, the woman I hadn't looked at in years. One night, after we had spent hours talking, nothing heavy, just memories, silly stories, stolen dreams, I caught my reflection in the window, the curve of my lips, the light in my eyes, the bare shoulder wrapped in his arm. And I whispered something I hadn't said in years. I feel alive, not because of him, but because of what he mirrored back to me. He didn't give me value. He reminded me of it. He reminded me I had never lost it. Love with him wasn't loud. It didn't shout to be heard. It breathed. It wrapped itself around my spine, warmed my bones, and lit little fires in the corners of my soul that had gone dark long ago. There was nothing dramatic about the way he looked at me from across the room. No grand gestures, but there was truth. Every time he reached for me, it was with intention. Every time he said my name, it was with warmth. Every time he touched my skin, it was with reverence. Not because I was forbidden, but because I was worth it. And that was the miracle, not that he loved me, but that he helped me love myself again. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of what it means to be truly seen, truly wanted, and deeply loved, then stay with us. There are more moments, more truths, more hearts to unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story that speaks directly to your soul. You deserve to feel this every time.